is back. The Drool King Lotor has returned with a dark energy that can destroy the galaxy. Our only hope? The Voltron Force, a team of 5 heroic pilots that control 5 awesome robot lions. When Lotor's monstrous road beasts attack, the lions come together to form Voltron, defender of the universe.
Oh! Let's Voltron! Oh! Let's Voltron! Oh! Let's Voltron!
Welcome, Voltron fans. This is Marc Morell, your host for Let's Voltron, the official Voltron podcast. I'm here for the final review of Voltron Force. After 4 years, we're going to review the last episode, Black. And I'm here with my co-host, Greg Tyler. Welcome, Greg.
Hello, Marc Morell. Hello, fellow Voltron fans across the universe. This has been quite a journey in celebrating Voltron Force's 10th anniversary starting in 2021. Yeah, we're finally at the 26th and last episode of Voltron Force. The only thing that is, a little more sobering than that is the fact that the show only got the one season.
Yeah.
But in any event, this is a really great one, a great wrap to a good season. And we've got some special guests to help us to finish this up. Who do we have?
Yes, we have Linda and Tara. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
Hello!
Hello.
How you doing?
All right.
Doing great.
Glad to be here.
Good.
Glad to have you.
How was your winter?
I think I moved to Crydor.
I think I went with you. We went from the deep
That's a Voltron Force reference, everybody.
Yes.
went from the deep south to the icy planet of Crydor for 1 week at least.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because you were both looking for Sven.
True. You do have the 2 resident Sven girls here.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yep.
Yes, we do.
So we haven't
You
caught
were
up.
looking for Sven, eh?
Oh yeah,
Did you
get me every
find
time
him?
with that, Greg. Love it.
So we haven't caught up with either one of you for quite a while. So why don't you each tell us what you've been up to lately? Let's start with Linda.
Of course, you're going to start with me.
Mm-hmm.
So since the last time I talked to you guys, I've gotten married. Coming up on my 6th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I live in Vermont. And
Nice.
I've left. I'm not in the legal field anymore. I work for a healthcare company as a scheduler.
Nice.
Still a Voltron fan.
Oh, always.
So
had
something's
Volt-
never changed.
I had Voltron at my wedding.
Okay.
All right.
He was on top of my wedding cake.
As
Oh,
it
yeah.
should be.
Nice.
That's cool.
Okay, how about you, Tara? How's it going?
Oh, it's been going good. Still in the automotive field. I went from auto repair shop life to dealership life, so had a career change there, which was for the better. Met somebody wonderful that's still in my life, and things have been going really
Yay.
good. So, we'll see where that goes, but just been working, coming to the end of hockey season, which I never thought I'd be involved in, but I am. And but yeah, we'll leave it at that. And just been enjoying life and still living in Alabama, and that's pretty much about the same. Not much has changed. Still same old, looking forward to VoltCon in October,
Yes.
which we still need to get Miss Linda to.
Yes.
Yeah, we kind of like it. We think you would too.
Yes.
I shall have to make plans.
Okay.
So as a recap, the 2 of you are Voltron fans going back to the original show. Is that right?
Oh, yes.
Correct. And also former members of the Snarktron Force, which the Twitter RP,
Yes.
Mhm.
which all kind of came around when Voltron Force was coming to inception.
Yes.
Those were some
Nice.
fun times with the Snarktron Force doing Twitter
Oh,
role
was it?
playing for Voltron.
Yep.
It was.
And oddly enough, Linda was Sven and I was
Mhm.
Romel.
Yep.
Right.
So I guess we'll get into your thoughts on Voltron Force as we move through this
Mhm.
episode. But obviously, the two of you must have at least had a passing interest in it to have joined us here to review Black.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
I
Cool.
don't know if y'all remember, but we, Snarktron Force, did a role play of the script for the unaired second season premiere.
Oh,
First
wow.
episode. Yeah, I still have that in my phone somewhere, and it's actually still on Twitter. If
Hmm.
you go back
Oh
and
my
look,
gosh.
If you dig
it's
far
still
enough,
there.
it's still there.
Hmm.
Wow.
Hmm.
Yep,
That is so cool.
I remember,
Jeremy
and
gave that to us, didn't he,
Mm.
Tara?
he did, and I think I remember seeing Bob cringe when he found out about it.
Oh,
But I remember sitting in in a subway in the sandwich shop, not the subway in
uh-huh.
New York,
Right.
but we were in New York at New York Comic Con, and someone let us hold something. It was me and Mark Oliver, but I'll leave other people out because I don't want to get them in trouble. But they actually let us hold that script and look at it
Wow.
before we got to do. Mark wasn't part of it, but we got to do the reading of the script, and it was really cool. It was fun to do.
Hmm. It was.
Hmm.
So I have never seen that script. Have you, Mark?
No. Here's the thing. I went to WEP back in 2012, and I was doing some interviews with Jeremy and Bob at the time, and they were acting like they were going to season two, during
Wow.
that interview. During that interview, they were also talking about the live action movie. But that one never
So
came to pass. But
so maybe in another 10 years we'll get a season 2.
yeah,
Maybe.
hey, if Voltron goes gangbusters in popularity again,
Mm.
anything can happen. I mean, you've seen what they're doing with some of the Marvel stuff. Marvel got so popular that they were doing what if animated sequences of, basically anything that could happen with any of the characters. They were going off comic book on this one,
Oh,
Oh
yes.
yeah.
So and Star Wars has done so many things, gone back to so many different places, and I think anything is possible
Hmm.
if you get that popular.
And the common denominator in those two is Disney.
Well, yeah, yeah. Let's hope Disney doesn't take hold of Voltron.
Oh, no,
Please,
no,
Oh.
no,
please
no, no,
Or
no,
no.
Michael
no,
Bay.
no. Bite your tongue, Tara Marie.
Mm.
So yeah. So
When if you don't mind, Mark, when in 2012 were you at Web? I'm just trying to get a
I
bearing for when that would have been.
I'm thinking it would have been somewhere around June because I went to the National Bowling Tournament that year, and it was in Baton Rouge. Our squads always went in June,
Okay.
so I'm thinking it was early June,
That would make
and
sense.
I went right
So is
there, right to WEP after Baton Rouge. So
Okay. So to remind folks, the last episode of Voltron Force, which we're reviewing tonight, premiered April 25th of 2012. So either they were very much thinking a second season was going to happen that late in the game, or
yeah,
they faked it really well.
yeah,
But yeah, wow, that's
right,
amazing.
right. So there was no indication at that time, only a couple months after the last episode aired, that there wasn't going to be a second season.
Wow.
So there you go. I just wanted to let everybody know that this fourth draft of the script that I'm going off of here was written on November 11th of 2010. And as you said, Greg, the episode came out in April of 2012. So, that's how long it goes from the last the last draft of the script to the air. That,
Yeah, which makes
Wow.
sense because you got to do your recordings and this was a traditionally recorded show where all the dialogue would have been recorded before they did the animation. So, yeah, I mean, that kind of lead time makes sense.
Yeah, and here we are. The writer of this final episode is the story editor, Todd Garfield.
Yeah. Do you want me to spin through the credits and all
Yes,
that?
yes.
All right. So, as we usually do, this is the episode Black, the 26th episode. It was production number 126, originally aired April 25th, 2012. It was story edited and written, as you said, by Todd Garfield. Let's see what else we got. It was story by Jeremy Corey and Todd Garfield, written by Todd Garfield, directed as every episode was by Stephen E. Gordon. Actually, yeah, supervising director, directed by John Delaney. I'm going to stumble a little bit through the cast list here, but it's most of our usual favorites. Ashley Ball returns as Allura. Doron Bell Jr. comes back as Vince. Shannon Chan Kent returns as Larmina. Andrew Francis plays Lance. I'm going through my little list here. Ron Halder returns as Karan. Uh, Mark Hildreth, of course, does not come back. We saw Lotor for the last time in the previous episode. Giles Patton is Keith. Ty Olson is Hunk. Who else? Vincent Tong is Daniel. Sam Vincent is Pidge and Alfor. And did I get everybody? Who was Mayhawks? I missed Mayhawks.
Mayhawks.
That was Ron
Ron
Halder.
Halder.
He played
Yeah.
yeah, he was Mayhawks and Koran in this episode. Okay.
So I have a question. Who was the Erusian National Guard people?
Not credited.
The sound engineers.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we did have some bit parts there.
Oh, those poor guys.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you have a little bit of a synopsis of how we got to where we are, just to lead into this?
Well, in the last 25 episodes, no. So basically, leading up to this, the Voltron Force cadets, Larmina and Vince and Daniel have all been promoted from cadet to pilot by this point. In the previous episode, Daniel was the third and final cadet to be promoted. He's now Black Lion pilot. Known only to himself and his fellow cadets, and not to any of the original or the previous Voltron or current Voltron Force pilots. Daniel, several episodes ago, was infected with Hegarium, which has affected his judgment, and it's given him some unique powers, but it's also driving him a little bit into unstable territory. Let's put it that way. So, where things left off in the previous episode, as I said, he was promoted, basically making it seem as if he were a naturally gifted leader and combat tactician when he kind of cheated using his Hegarium mind link with Lotor, as well as relying on his fellow cadets to save him at the very end of the big battle. And during that battle, Lotor was defeated. At the very end of the episode, Mayhawks resuscitated Lotor one seemingly last time to gloat that Mayhawks was going to basically attack Earth. And oh yeah, by the way, before he left Planet Doom, he crushed the newly regenerated Lotor under one of the tentacles of the Castle Doom Robeast, and then that Robeast took off for Earth.
And Lotor was not to be resuscitated ever again.
In the finished episodes, that's true. I would love to pick the brains of our two guests to find out what was in that season 2 script, but maybe we could do that at the end of the review.
Okay. So we are starting off at the Castle of Lions, and Pidge in his new role is doing castle defense stuff. So he's watching on his monitor, and what we see is there's, this lion gargoyle head sort of thing that is on the side of the castle. It opens its jaws and it releases a blast that hits like a nearby mountain. and it explodes and shatters. And Pidge goes, "Whoa!" And then another holographic monitor pops up with Queen Allura on it. And she says, "Pidge, what was that?" And Pidge says, it's my latest defense system upgrade, the Lion's Roar. Really packs a punch. All right, so there was a little bit more to what Pidge had said there in the script that was never used. After he said really packs a punch, he said, but at this point, it takes forever to recharge, so it's pretty much a one-shot deal. And Laura said, I think one is plenty. And then Pidge said, man, I'm just loving having all this time to geek out our defense systems. So that whole thing never took place, but it seemed like maybe Todd wanted to bring back some idea. If you weren't fully paying attention in the last episode, Pidge is now on Castle Defense.
And if I just watched the episode a little while ago, getting ready for this, and I thought something was missing in that interchange between Pidge and Allura.
Yeah, it went really quick, didn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, because she was like, "Oh, okay," real quick.
Yeah, because normally she wouldn't let that go with just glad to hear it, Pidge. She would have been concerned. I mean, if a mountain gets destroyed nearby the castle.
Is anybody hiking the mountain, living at the bottom of the mountain?
Did you make sure that there was an evacuation of that mountain prior to this?
It's Voltron that go lion. We're sure everybody got safely off the planet.
Right.
Before
That's
Lotor
right.
started his dirty work.
Or as far as we know, the planet has a population of about 25, so who knows?
Yeah.
Okay. So instead, Laura just says, glad to hear it, Pidge. And then she lowers her Voltcom and approaches a doorway. She stops as she sees Keith. And Keith is in front of a group of people. And Allura says, and this is like in the Great Hall, okay? So Allura says, there you are, Keith. So I was thinking, now that you're officially retired from the Voltron Force, we could get to official business and set up a committee to review. And then she stops because Keith is preoccupied with several citizens from Maris there. Allura says, Keith, what's going on here? And Keith says, I thought we could use an Erusian National Guard. I'm starting to recruit so I can train them. Now, why do you think Keith would think that we need an Erusian National Guard?
Because Keith has absolutely no idea how to function if he's not playing soldier.
Mhm.
Because it's probably a good idea to have a defense force, finally, other than the
Right?
Voltron Force.
You mean like a backup?
Something.
Yeah.
A backup for the backup?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, if there's 3 new cadets that have become pilots, then Pidge, Allura, and Keith could be the backup.
Especially if Pidge is responsible for the defenses of the planet.
Right. Allura says, Keith, this is a time of peace. And Keith says, peacetime is the best time to prepare for duty. Right, soldiers? And they all say, yes, sir.
And I know it's meant as a joke, but he's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
You don't prepare
Yes.
for battle when you're at war.
No.
So Allura says, this is going to be an interesting transition.
And you can tell she's got a headache already.
Yeah.
So we should comment that our heroes, our 3 newly retired from the Voltron Force heroes, are dressed very differently than we've seen them before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Allura has a pink kind of a jumpsuit getup that looks a lot like Allura's off-duty clothing in Voltron Defender of the Universe. Keith's got this really fancy black and red trimmed getup that resembles his red and white trimmed getup from Voltron from the 80s. And Pidge has got a green outfit that is in desperate need of boots.
And French.
And the
Of course.
fringe.
Yes, that too. That too.
we switch to a scene in a dark hallway. They're entering a dark room, and this is Lance and Hunk and the cadets, now newly pilots. So basically, it's the new Voltron Force all together right now. Okay. Lance says, "So where are you newbies taking us?" And then he trips. The lights come up, and then you see Larmina saying, "Better watch your step now that the newbies outnumber the oldies." So Lance says, "What is this place?" And Vince says, "It was our secret cadet lair, hence its very clever name, the Lair." And then Lance looks around impressed, then turns to Hunk, and Lance says, "Very cool. I can't believe we didn't know this existed." And Hunk says, "Oh, I've been coming down here a while, to help them build their..." And they all go, "Shh." And he goes, "What?" Lance says, "You guys told Hunk about your secret place and not me? I thought I was the cool cadet favorite." Hunk says, "Nope." Like, everybody knew that Lance wasn't the cadet favorite. Larmina tries to console him. She says, "Well, you have a cooler jacket." Daniel says, Now, guys, no need to argue because we don't need to keep secrets from each other anymore. We're all part of the Voltron Force now. And as your new team leader," and of course, Lance goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hey, don't let this go to your head too quickly here, kiddo. You're barely out of cadet diapers, so let's not start barking orders before you break in your big boy pants." Daniel says, "Hey, I can't help it if the Black Lion pilot is the leader of the Voltron Force. Of course, if you want to trade and give up Red." And then Lance smiles and says, "Well played, sir. I'm a Red man through and through. Carry on." So Daniel says, "Thanks, subordinate. So I was thinking now we could use this as a secret room for the Voltron Force, current members only." Larmina says, "You want to hide stuff from Alora, Keith, and Pidge?" He sort of gives a devious smile, and Lance says, "Devious already. This could be fun, kid. I mean, sir." Larmina says, "Don't you want their help? I mean, aren't you at all nervous about being the leader of the Voltron Force?" Now, there was a whole bunch of stuff here that we didn't have. Okay.
In the script, you mean?
Yeah. The actual thing that Daniel says to this is, "I was born to lead this team, and besides, we just defeated all the evil in the galaxy, so I have plenty of time for the learning curve," and that was it. But prior to that, there was a little bit of the telepathic thing going on between Vince and Daniel, where Vince was saying, "You probably should be considering you cheated to get the job." And Larmina looks up and says, "You guys got to stop that telepathic thing now that we're all on the same team." And then Lance and Hunk are like, "Telepathy? What?" And Daniel started, "We have so much to learn about each other. Maybe I'll organize a team bonding retreat." And then he said, "But to answer your question, no, not nervous at all." So all of that was taken out. Just a lot of extra chatter.
Yeah.
The telepathic thing again. I guess they figured out we don't need that.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, this episode is very dense. I mean, the finished episode. There's
Yeah.
so much activity, and I think they had to trim that stuff, but that stuff does sure give some extra insight into what's going on.
Right. So after Daniel actually says, "So I have plenty of time for the learning curve," we cut to Earth. We're actually looking at Earth from space. Then suddenly you see a shadow shape with swirling tentacles. And of course, you can tell if you watched the last episode that this is Mayhawks in the Castle Doom ship, Robeast, whatever he wants to call it. And then you start seeing the Earth getting bombarded by a lot of like the tentacles will fire, and things start blowing up on Earth. And the script lets us know that it's actually targeting the Galaxy Alliance compound, but you don't know that until they start talking. Okay,
Mhm.
all of these shots of things getting shot and destroyed, and you see Koran, and he says evacuation elevators now, and he's talking to a bunch of other people in the room. Now, Koran reaches out to Pidge on the comms, and he says, Pidge, come in. Earth is under attack, and the GA compound has been compromised. The delegates and I have escaped to the den beneath. So we haven't seen the Galaxy Alliance compound on Earth in a long time, in several episodes, right, Greg?
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen it since the trial of Sky Marshal Wade.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was back in it. Yeah, I don't remember when that was, but it was quite a while back.
Pidge says, Koran? Guys, I need you in the control room. Stat, something's. And then you see Mayhawks come on the screen. He says, I'm afraid Koran is busy cowering at the moment. Pidge says, Mayhawks, but Lotor's. And then you see Mayhawks say, out of the picture? Yes, he was more than a single image in my master mosaic.
I think this part of the episode is some very, very efficient storytelling. And in establishing, this show is not as serialized as Legendary Defender was, but obviously it had a developing arc. And I think they did a really good job setting the stage for this episode in a very short number of sequences. Um, there were some things they could have kept in the script from the script, but I do think by and large they did a really effective job establishing the status quo of this episode.
Yeah, what do you guys think?
I agree.
I agree.
Okay. So this whole idea of Mayhawks being able to just jump in on their conversations at any moment, that's sort of something you just have to. They took artistic license with that, right?
Hmm.
Because aren't they supposed to be kind of secure communication channels?
You would think.
You would think, especially with Pidge being in charge of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could wave your hands and say, by this point, Mayhawks had already learned a fair amount about where the lion lairs were or the dens. He had learned part of Voltron's programming back on Volto, and it probably has more information than we are probably
And
aware of. But
and
I don't know.
correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Gary in that episode get into the Nexus?
That's true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah, but
So, yeah,
I was thinking about this is the same Pidge who had the whole world convinced, that Stereolactic was this band, and he had nothing to do with
Yep.
it.
He was too busy blowing up mountains.
Right. So anyway, um,
good point.
so Alora on the monitor says, Pidge, what's going on? And Mayhawk says, the rest of the team is here. Fantastic. And then Mayhawks continues, Koran was calling to inform you that I have begun my greatest experiment, galactic chaos. And I found the best way to incite disorder is to cut off the head, which is why I have decapitated the Galaxy Alliance. So, do you think he really needed to do anything to the Galaxy Alliance, or do you think he was just trying to get Voltron to come over?
He was more so trying to get Voltron to come over, I think.
To quote a line from Defenders of the Universe, the attack on Balto, when Lotor said, I knew an attack on one of their home planets would bring them running.
Okay.
So he was
Makes sense to me.
I just think it was pretty quick for him to take out the compound. When you talk about the Galaxy Alliance, the Galaxy Alliance is much bigger than that, right? I mean, it's an alliance of several galaxies, right? They gotta have more firepower than what was on Earth, right?
You would think.
You would think. But the big bad has been defeated.
Right.
We've let our guard down.
Right.
And maybe this was like Star Trek, where in all too many episodes, the Enterprise was the only ship in the range to help anybody out.
And the warp drive is
Maybe,
acting up again.
yeah, something like that. Who knows?
So they don't show this, okay, but there's a whole bunch of things in the script that would indicate that several key places around the Earth are also getting destroyed. The Eiffel Tower, um, some Japanese places, a tropical beach, um, and that really never gets shown on the screen, right?
Right.
Right. And that in a sense, if they did show it, would make more sense because, you're gonna attack someplace off far away, would bring the firepower to try and save that. You go to the main target while others are distracted.
Mhm. Yep,
But
Right,
diversions.
right. So when Mayhawks says, chaos is already reigning here on Earth, my human lab rats are performing, I figured global chaos would make it nearly impossible for the Voltron Force to stop me, which you will inevitably attempt to do. And so while he's saying that, you see people running and screaming from blasts and stuff like that, but you don't see what they might have indicated in the script as what their original plan was to do. Mayhawk says, I just wanted to place this courtesy call so you knew what to pack. See you soon. And then Pidge says, he turned Castle Doom into a road beast. Voltron has never faced anything that big before. And then Keith says, looks like it will now. Time for the Voltron Force to deploy. Lance says, we'll strategize on the way. And then Daniel says, to the Lions. And Lance says, oh, right. Daniel, no offense, but, and he turns to Keith, are you sure you don't want to handle this last one here? I mean, something like this for Daniel's first mission as the Black Lion pilot. And Daniel says, hey, I'm ready. I can handle this. So Keith says, Daniel's right. You all witnessed him prove himself to be a sharp team leader and battle strategist. Now you all need to be supportive and trust in your new leader. I'll hang back here and monitor from the control room, here to offer you any guidance should you need it. Daniel says, thanks for the opportunity, Keith. But I assure you, I won't need any help. Now, as I said before, to the Lions. And then Lance says, you heard the man. And they all head to their individual lions. And you get to see this where they go through the doorways, they jump on their zip lines, they take them to their speeder, which takes them to their cockpit. And then they all come out of their individual areas, the Black Lion comes out of the top of the castle.
green out of the forest.
Green comes out of the forest. Blue comes out of the water. Yeah, that whole thing.
So, what could go wrong?
Absolutely nothing.
I will have to be honest and say that I had forgotten how very much I always wanted to smack Daniel until that particular scene because he is just insufferable.
Oh,
So I have a question. Do you think this is more of the original Daniel we saw towards the beginning of the show? And it's just the Hegarium is just bringing it all out?
I think so. He's always been an arrogant character.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of this is, how someone who's intoxicated might be a little less inhibited with their what might be inherent personality traits.
Yeah.
I wonder if the Hegarium has just kind of got him, behaving in a less
His
inhibited
filter
state.
his filters are down.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I
Yeah.
so wish Lance would shake them back up for him.
Yeah, I mean, there have been times during the 26 episodes where we've seen some real good stuff coming out of Daniel, where he didn't think about himself at all. He thought about the team, he thought about somebody else. And in this episode, it's pretty clear he's only thinking about himself.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Power
So-
corrupts.
So as we go here, the Keith and Allura are standing on the balcony and they're watching all the lions take off for the sky. And Allura says, "Are you sure about this, Keith?" And he looks off, but he never says anything.
So it's really easy to say, Daniel, shame, shame, shame. But I keep looking at this entire team thinking, shame, shame, shame.
Yeah.
So as the lions approach Earth, you hear Daniel say, "Approaching Earth, get ready." And then Lance says, "All right, Dan, man, what's the plan? You want us to split up and take some of these tentacles before the main event?" What we see here is a reference in the script to what would have happened, if they had shown those actual images of like Paris, the beach, all this other stuff. Because Larmina says, "I'll hit the beach, wouldn't mind a little tropical sun." And then Hunk says, "I've never been to Paris." And then Vince says, "I'll go save the video games." So,
Oh, gosh.
so these are all things that would have been had they actually used that prior stuff. So they had to get rid of this part. Keith is looking and he says, "They're on the right track. The prudent course of action here is spreading out to tackle the immediate dangers first." And Allura says, "So tell him that." And Keith says, "Daniel's got to make his own decision."
Grr.
So in the black cockpit, Daniel says, "Sorry, guys, no point in spreading out and messing around with the lions. So for once, let's not waste time and just form our giant robot to attack the source of the problem. Finish this thing with some speed." Now, there were probably a lot of Voltron fans out there saying, "Yeah!" Right?
I can imagine that.
Because how often have they tried to attack with each of the individual lions, gotten nowhere, gotten thrown around and bumped around until they're almost, dying, and then finally form Voltron, right? There's got to be a lot of fans that thought that, "Oh, that's cool. I like this new Voltron Force," right?
Right.
Yeah.
The whole 3-minute combination sequence.
Think how much more episode time you have if you don't have to bother with the combination sequence.
Right. Right.
The
So
closer you are to form Blazing Sword.
So Lance says, "I don't know, Daniel. I think we should probably..." "Nope, you're the boss." And then Daniel says, "That's right. Follow me to the GA compound. We're going to bag us a monster castle." And then Keith says, "The reason we don't always form Voltron right away is a strategic one. Sometimes an enemy needs to be weakened on several fronts before we can attack from a single position." And Allura says, "This is a new Voltron Force, so perhaps this new strategy is the way of the future." What you see is Castle Doom Robeast at the GA compound, and they see it for the first time. And Mayhawks is laughing, and he says, "About time." Daniel says, "All right, guys, get ready for flash form." And Vince says, "Daniel, maybe we should use the standard formation sequence here. It uses less power." And Daniel says, "We're not wasting time on that either. Voltron is all flash form all the time now." And Vince says, "But," and Daniel says, "Let's Voltron, flash form, go." And boom, forms Voltron just like that.
Time do you think passed between the previous episode and this one?
How much time?
Yeah, days, weeks.
No. It could have been at least a month.
You'd think they'd do some combat training, but
Yeah, that they would have worked this out even before they got anywhere, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
You can't train someone that's not willing to listen.
right.
Thinks they know everything already.
Yep.
Fair.
So as Voltron sees this giant Robeast for the first time, Daniel says, "This is the biggest Robeast we ever faced." So what happens is that they immediately go to form Blazing Sword. I mean, how soon have you seen this in any of the episodes where they form Voltron that fast and then they go right to form Blazing Sword? As you see this here, Mayhawks is watching on one of his screens. Voltron lands, ducking, then leaping to avoid two tentacles. And Mayhawk says, frisky and arrogant. Who are you and what have you done with my Voltron? Daniel says, haha, looks like the squid's too slow for our cat-like reflexes. Lance says, nice, Danny boy. Now let's slice up some calamari. And then Daniel says, chill, Lance. I was about to make our next move. And then Daniel jerks on the controls. And Lance says, easy, pal, man. Does being the Black Lion pilot automatically destroy your sense of humor? Daniel says, well, if you're done being funny, I'm ready to end this. So there's a big section here that was taken out. There's some criticisms that are happening here. There's a split screen, Daniel, Vince, and Larmina. Larmina says, already? And Vince says, that's a lot of juice at this stage of the battle. Daniel says, Vince, get out of my head. I got this, but I need to concentrate. They're talking telepathically.
Mhm.
And Keith is saying, Daniel, remember this battle might be a marathon, not a sprint. And Daniel says, well, this is how I run, speed boost. And then Vince says power boost. And then Larmina says butt kick boost. So all of that didn't happen. And what we see instead is you see Voltron jump towards the camera or towards us. And Mayhawk says, poor choice. And he raises up a tentacle and begins to whip it down. And then a giant tentacle swoops in from off screen and bats Voltron back like he's being knocked out of the ballpark.
Wouldn't that have been a nice touch? As dense as the episode is, I remember the first time I watched this thinking, well, why didn't they use the combined cadet powers in this last episode? I mean, we've seen that it was very effective at the end of the previous episode. They don't even bother to mention it in this episode. That's one thing that I think would have been nice to see.
Yeah. So use your most powerful move first, right? The one that ended it with Lotor, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, you think that? I mean,
I think.
not to have even mentioned it is weird to me.
Yeah.
And it's possible too that this version of Daniel wouldn't want to share the credit, the glory, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
That is a
He's
very
very
good point.
he's very much, I got this, me, 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 me.
Mhm.
Right. Voltron has never been about one person.
Never,
Ever.
never.
It's about a team
Hmm.
working together. Come together like Voltron,
Yes.
right? Come together.
Oh yeah.
Mark is showing off his T-shirt for those of us those who are listening into the podcast.
It's all about teamwork.
Hmm.
That's right.
All right. So what we see after they get hit pretty hard, Vince says, our interlocks don't have enough power to take this. The tentacles start grabbing Voltron and basically rips Voltron apart back into the lions.
Now, of course, that is in the finished episode.
Yep.
And that was quite a thing to see. What did the two of you think about this part here?
They could do that.
Yeah. Yeah, because I watched that like Linda, I watched it earlier, and it's been a while since I've watched the episode. I had actually forgotten about that, and I don't think we saw it happen many times over the renditions of Voltron. I think maybe once in Go Lion, but it was quite shocking to see.
Yeah.
And to see each of the pieces slammed to the ground
Hmm.
helplessly, that was a big deal.
Yeah. Vince says, Daniel, you have to tell others the truth. This is telepathically, by the way, and this is in the actual script. Daniel, you have to tell the others the truth. You were only able to pull off that stuff in the last battle because you could read our enemy's mind. Nobody else knows that, and there's lives on the line because they trust you. And Daniel says back telepathically, are you kidding? Are you kidding me? If I tell them that, I'll lose Black Lion. But if I can lead us to a win here, no one will care. I need to prove myself. It's all about him again.
Hmm.
And Vince says, Daniel, this isn't a game. You were supposed to stop being reckless when you were cured of your Hagarium infection. He's not
He
cured.
wasn't.
No.
So at the end of the last episode, do you think he was lying when he said it was all gone?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think he
I think it's
was.
possible that he was true, that he was honest and just assumed it was. But he might have been lying. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think he was lying.
I think he was.
I do too. Sure, it's
So,
gone. This is just the new, more confident me.
right. So Daniel says, Vince, I got this. And then Lance says, Daniel, I'm sorry, pal, but I'm pulling experience rank here and taking over. Daniel says, no, I can handle this. Lance says, we can debate this whole leadership thing later, but right now we need to move. So the tentacles begin attacking the lions again. And Lance says, form a coordinated 5-lion attack to eliminate some of these tentacles. Hunk, you take the south-southwest. Hunk says, on it. Lance says, Daniel, you take Daniel. Daniel just goes at him himself.
Right up the middle.
Right. And Keith says, Daniel, what are you doing? Where is all the teamwork and strategy you displayed to earn your seat? Daniel says, none of you trust me. Keith says, Daniel, this isn't about you or your need to prove yourself. This is about Voltron, the team. Daniel says, if you guys don't believe I can do this, then I'll show you I can. So this is obviously somebody who's infected with Agarium and is not giving up on it. Meanwhile, inside the Castle Doom Row Beast in the throne room, Mayhawk says, looky, looky, it seems dissension is brewing on the Voltron Force, the first stage of chaos. Perhaps it will speed the process along if I take out the head. So now he's going after Black Lion. So you see Black running, and then suddenly tentacles begin to spring up and swing in from every direction, wailing on Black. And Larmina says, Daniel! And then the lions spring to help him, but are batted away. And Keith says, can't we do anything to help them from here? Pidge says, well, I don't, Pidge doesn't know. This is his first time. He works on castle defenses on Aris, not on helping the Voltron Force from afar, right?
Which brings up an interesting continuity glitch that I picked up on. The castle flew before. At the end of Defender of the Universe, the castle flew.
Well, yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's a new thing.
Well, here's the thing. It's the new thing for this show, right?
Yeah. But if this show is a direct follow-on from Defender of the Universe, castle flying shouldn't be a new thing.
Is it assumed that everything that happened in the previous show was canon for this show?
Okay. Makes sense.
That's my question.
I thought it was, but I don't know.
So we have seen some things that were redone in this show that happened in the original show. And in my opinion, it was more paying homage to the original show rather than a direct, sequel to the show saying all these things that happened in Defender of the Universe are actual canon for this show.
Makes sense.
What do you think, Greg?
I think anytime fans debate what's canon in a show, my eyes glaze over. I am a longtime Star Trek fan, and I've heard so many people ad nauseum argue about what is and isn't canon. Yeah. So I tend to think of each show as its own beast and go from there. But again, people's mileage may vary.
Yeah. So I think we can assume in this case that it's happening for the first time for them.
Okay.
And they, we don't know about the original show.
Fair enough.
Okay. After Pidge is like stumbling, basically what happens is Keith says, Daniel, you need to eject. And then Daniel says, no, I've worked too hard to become the black pilot and I'm not abandoning this lion. And Keith says, I need to get to Earth now. There's a section here where Allura, when Keith is saying, "Can't we do anything to help them?" And Pidge is saying, "Well, I don't." You see in the background, Alora runs towards the door, and what she went to was the throne room for, I mean, Alfor's tomb, King Alfor's tomb.
Mhm.
So she's looking to get some advice from her father, and she yells, "Father, are you here?" And King Alfor says, "I sense your distress." Alora says, "I have been following your advice, trusting destiny, but all this seems to be leading to is the destruction of Voltron." And Alfor says, "Only when tested that one's true valor is discovered." There's this whole section here with Alfor's tomb. In the script, they kind of broke it up. Like
Okay.
they started with Alfor's tomb and then went back to Keith and then went back to Alfor's tomb. Instead, what they did was they went directly to Keith and then did the whole Alfor's tomb scene. So I think somewhere along the line they said, "Hey, let's go back and forth between Alfor's." No, let's just do it all at one shot. King Alfor says, now that you are queen, my time with you is over." And she says, "What?" He says, "I need to move on so you can make this a kingdom of your own. Before I leave you, I have one final gift." And then the room begins to rumble. And we all know what this is, right?
Well,
Yeah,
we've all watched the episode, so yeah.
well, I'm saying when this happened in the original series, it was basically they pressed a button, right, on the tomb,
Hmm.
and then that's when the castle became a ship, right?
Well, I thought Koran had a big key that he stuck in the console
Is
in
that what he did?
the control room. Yeah, and castle
Yeah.
control.
The button that you're thinking about, Mark,
Yeah,
was
what was
when
that?
that was when the old castle,
Oh,
remember the old castle
that's
that we
right.
Oh,
first we
okay.
saw
Yeah.
That's
was
right.
replaced with a new one.
Right,
That's
right.
where your button comes in.
That I'm sorry, I confused the two.
That's all right.
That's all right.
When the old castle became a new castle versus when the castle became a ship. Okay.
That's all right.
Okay.
We got to keep all these castle transformations straight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good luck.
So at this point, Keith says, "I'm coming, Daniel." And then Pidge says, "Keith, wait, don't launch. We need you in the control room because of what's happening with the rumbling and everything."
Hmm.
And then Keith says, "But Daniel," and then Pidge says, "No time to explain. Daniel will be much better off if you get up here right now. You don't want to miss this." So that is basically the end of Act Two. So do you think it was wise for them to not show what was really happening and then to have it appear later? What would you have
You
rather
mean
had
not show
done?
the transformation?
In the original series, you saw the whole thing of it
Mhm.
becoming a ship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Koran actually gave a preview on the screen,
Yeah.
telling everyone that the castle could turn into a spaceship. And it wasn't a surprise. They turned it into the ship as a deliberate attack on Planet Doom.
Yep.
Yeah. And did you know what was happening when you saw this episode for the first time?
Had a feeling.
Tara, do you remember?
Or
Yeah. I I I with Linda, I had a feeling because it was so poignant in the original episode, you kind of wondered if it was gonna happen in this series. So kind of had an inkling it may be happening, especially with the way Alfor was speaking and everything. Because I think if I remember correctly, back in Defender of the Universe, she went running to him kind of at the same point when this before the transformation, so it kind of played along the same lines, so it was eventually going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I remember what I thought of the moment. I don't. The episode, everything happened very quickly. So I don't know that I remembered. I don't know that I remember even thinking about what the next step would be because it happens pretty quickly after the scene. I
I
don't know.
I I tend to remember that it went to commercial, right?
Okay.
Right after that. He says you don't want to miss this, right? Well, guess what? We missed it. It came back from commercial and they went somewhere else. And then it shows up.
Mm-hmm.
And oh man. Maybe they meant you don't want to miss these commercials from our sponsors.
Exactly.
Frosted Lucky Charms. Anyway,
Ma-
They're magically delicious.
that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So coming back, the beginning of Act 3, we're at the GA compound. It's night. Black Lion is held down by a tentacle. Daniel's pretty beaten up, struggling at the controls. Lance pops up on a monitor, and Lance says, "Daniel, I'm coming in. You need to get out of black so I can." And then he gets hit. And then Hunk says, "I'll get you, pal." Daniel says, "You can stop with the rescue attempts. I'm not leaving this." And then there's a pained scream. What we don't see is there was a scene that was written into this where Daniel had reached out to Vince and said, "Vince, you got to help me. I need your power." And Vince says, "I'll try, man. If this works for you, you need to retreat." Daniel says, "It's working." So that never happened. He did the whole eyes glowing thing and then helped Daniel. It didn't happen.
I think that was a good omission, frankly.
Yeah,
It would have
Yeah.
slowed the story down too much.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think frankly that shows even a little bit more of Daniel trying to act like, "Hey, I've got this,"
Mhm.
and the rest of the team not knowing what he's really up to.
Mm-hmm.
And by getting power from Vince,
This
that'll
Daniel isn't going to ask for help.
right, that only shows that he needs help.
Hmm
But as long as the rest of the team doesn't know about it, I got this. Right.
Teenage boys.
So Mayhox is watching this on his floating orb monitors, and he says, "Oh, this is cute, but no more." And his eyes narrow as he squeezes the twisted tentacle tighter. Something happens where Daniel sort of loses consciousness, I think, right?
hmm
Mm-hmm.
And Larmina
Yeah.
says, "Daniel, are you all right?" And there's no answer. The tentacle is about to raise up and then end Black Lion for good when it widens out and we start to see laser impacts on the tentacles from above. And what it is the reveal of the Castle of Lions as a spaceship. And it's roaring overhead and it's loaded with firepower and it's unleashing on the Castle Doom Row Beast.
And I remember thinking that was really, really cool to see.
Yes.
Yeah. And Vince says, "The Castle of Lions can fly?" And Keith says, "Hit it with everything we've got." So Mayhox says, "Castle versus castle action, huh? This was not part of the plan." And for the first time, it seems like Mayhox is really perturbed now. For the rest of the episode, it seemed like he was completely in control, but now he seems like, "Hey, I wasn't thinking about this." You mean they can have a Castle Row Beast too?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you see Lance saying, "Quick, get to a safe spot." And then Keith says, "Black Lion's in trouble." And he says, "I need to get down there to save Daniel." And then Alora says, "But who will pilot the castle?" And then Karan gets on and he says, "I believe I can handle that." And Alora says, "Karan?" Karan says, "Glad we kept a few of these around." He's got a spaceship, just a regular spaceship, and he's flying and he's avoiding tentacles and he's getting himself into the Castle Lion spaceship. So he makes a daring maneuver to get onto the spaceship. And then he's going to pilot the spaceship.
Karan the man.
Yeah.
Indeed.
In the meantime, Keith is able to jump out. He avoids some tentacles and he gets to Black Lion. He gets inside And then Alora says, Keith, how is he? And he goes, oh, Daniel. So he places Daniel back into the cadet co-pilot seat. He gets back into the pilot seat and he says, all right, team, Black is rebooting, but he's pretty drained. Karan, going to need you guys to give us some space. Only one way to recharge here. Everybody knows the way to recharge is to form Voltron again.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I thought they were going to use the tail like an electrical cord, but okay.
Karan says, we've got your back. And then, of course, we go through the normal sequence where Keith starts off ready to form Voltron, activate interlocks, dynatherms connected, infracells up, mega thrusters are go. Let's go Voltron Force. I got to tell you, I did like it when Daniel said let's Voltron previously.
Yes, but I'm glad they did it the old-fashioned way for this very last episode.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes. That was nice.
And my fat 50-year-old fangirl heart beat just a little bit faster when that music came on.
Mhm.
Yep. Form feet and legs, form arms and body, and I'll form the head. Now, everything's humming bright now, and Keith says power levels are back up. It's time to form Blazing Sword. So Voltron forms the Blazing Sword, holds it over its head. You have the Castle of Lions floating behind it. Now, here's the thing. The sword on Alfor's statue begins to glow, and we widen in as the glow gets brighter and brighter until it shoots a beam of power. This hits the blazing sword and makes it a super blazing sword. Did anybody know this was going to happen? Because this came out of left field.
Mm-mm.
Mhm.
Left
Yeah, that
field
was news to
nothing.
me.
This came from across the street from the ballpark.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hi, kitty.
And Vince says, did the castle just supercharge our sword? So Alora says, Father did have one more trick up his sleeve. So Keith says, oh, I'm going to make this hurt. Voltron launches into an offensive assault full of epic slashing through several of the large tentacles in a series of slicing shots. The tentacles burst into particles, leaving many half-flailing limbs all around. And as Voltron battles through the tentacles, you see Mayhawk saying, another interesting turn of events. However, a powerful sword does you no good if you can't swing it. And then all of a sudden the tentacles start grabbing the arms and legs. So Voltron can't move his arm to swing it. Voltron ends up dropping the sword.
And in the finished episode, it just sort of seems to fade away as it falls.
Mhm.
Yeah. So Mayhawk said, did Voltron drop something? Oops. And then Keith seems to be unfazed. He says, Vince, Larmina, follow Lance and Hunk's lead. And then what you see is while Voltron's being held, Keith says, 4 lion head attack. Suddenly, Voltron's lion head, hands, and feet launch off the robot. Everybody except the actual head of Voltron. So Larmina and Vince said, our heads fly? I had no idea Voltron could do this. And Lance and Hunk say, you still got a lot to learn, newbies. Yee-haw! And then Lance says, time to buzz the hive. And each of the heads go after tentacles all over the place, including the tentacles that are holding Voltron, and Voltron gets free. So they end up going actually through the walls of the Castle Doom Row Beast as well. Mayhawks is really mad now, and he says, I'll still take off your head. He's screaming this. I'll still take off your head. And then Keith says, no need, Mayhawks. I'll give it to you.
I love this part
Yes.
so
Mhm.
Yes.
much.
So the Black Lion head comes firing off of Voltron and goes straight at the Castle Doom Row Beast and straight at Mayhawks. And it basically like takes him out for good. So Lance says, a 5 lion head attack. Unreal. Now I feel like the newbie. And then Keith says, form Blazing Sword again. And he says, let's make sure this is over. And then you see Voltron grabs a sword and leaps up and gets on to, that shiny orb of Hegarium that was at the top of digs right into it, and it explodes in massive fashion. You start seeing pieces of the Castle Doom Road Beast explode into almost like fireworks.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sort of fades into actual fireworks that the team is watching because there's a celebration with using fireworks. So now they're at the Castle of Lions on Eris. At the foot of the castle, all the team is standing there. There's cheers coming from everywhere from all the people.
Keith and Daniel aren't with them.
Right. Keith and Daniel are not with them, but we have some business to attend to right now. So Daniel's sitting down as the fireworks are going off around him, and Keith walks up to him and says, "Not quite how we thought things were going to go down, huh?" Daniel doesn't say anything. Keith says, "We may have eliminated the threat of Hegarium for the time being, but there's still a lot of rebuilding to do, starting here with us." Daniel still says nothing. Keith says, "I'm sorry, Daniel. It's time." Daniel turns to him, gives him the black key from his Voltcom, and Daniel says, "It's just not fair. The Black Lion was supposed to be mine." And Keith says, "The honor of the Black Lion helm is earned with integrity. Leading the Voltron Force is about teamwork. It's not about any one person. It's bigger than that." This was cut a little bit. The original thing was supposed to, has nothing to do with it, Daniel. After he says leading the Voltron Force is about, and it said discipline, it's about experience, about attitude, and about teamwork. And above all, it's not about any one person. It's bigger than that. So they took out some of that and made it all just about teamwork.
Yeah.
Because that's what it really is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Daniel says, "But I thought it was my destiny." And Keith says, "You may not be ready yet, but we aren't giving up on you." So Keith inserts his key into his Voltcom, and then they do the clutching of the arms, and then Keith gets back the Black Lion pilot suit, and Daniel gets back his old clothes.
That outfit, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing the end of the show here, and Black Lion's running across the desert plain with the rest of the lions. And Keith says, "I had Pidge make a few modifications that I thought would suit your style." So Daniel's cockpit seat transforms into like a motorcycle speed mode.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Tumbler Batmobile from some of the recent Batman films.
Yeah.
Right.
And don't we, and this just popped in my head, don't we see Daniel riding a speed bike, something like that, the very first time we see him?
Exactly right.
Way back in the academy?
Yeah.
The very first episode, if you, they show Daniel as a little kid, then they show him at the academy, and Daniel's narrating it in a voiceover, and he says, "Of course, if this was the end of the story, him being bored at the academy, then I wouldn't be telling you this story." And they do a flash forward to him in the lion cockpit in that speedboat kind of or motorcycle configuration. So that was a flash forward to this moment.
Mm-hmm. Good call, Linda.
Yep.
What you see then is Daniel's cockpit transforms, and then the lions are running together, but this time Daniel speeds away in Black Lion. And then Vince suddenly looks worried. Lance says, well, Daniel's already coming back to rejoin the Pride, because he turns around and faces them and comes back towards them.
Mm-hmm.
But Vince doesn't look like this is good. Vince says he isn't coming to rejoin us. And then that's it. Black suddenly roars ferociously and cut to black.
But we see, if I remember right, Daniel's eyes glow purple.
Mhm.
Yes.
They do.
Yes,
They
they
do
do.
indeed.
Did before it
Almost
cuts
like
out.
Yes.
almost kind of like a Sopranos ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, there is a possible other alternate ending that they didn't use. After Vince says he isn't coming to rejoin us, Keith says no. So this is a backup to have if Keith's uncertain look isn't working on its own. However, we would prefer to see this scene executed without this line of dialogue. What that means, and then you see Vince and Larmina surprised yell into excited yell, and Lance and Hunk excited yells. The idea here is that you can tell Vince knows, and you can sort of tell Keith knows.
Yeah. Or at least suspects.
Yeah. All the other people had no idea about the Hegarium infection. The only ones that knew about it were Larmina and Vince and Daniel, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of can tell that Keith knows a little bit about his protege, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Something's up. But he trusts them enough to let him operate the Black Lions.
Yeah. So what did we think about this?
We got mad at the cliffhanger because we knew that it was we were never going to get any resolution.
Okay. But have you seen the book?
Yes. I have the book.
Okay. So
Yep. There we go.
there we go. Tara's showing the book. Okay, so in the book, we know what could
What
have
is the
happened.
book for our listeners?
It's Voltron from Days of Long Ago, a 30th anniversary celebration.
Yes.
And Tara's doing her whole Phantom Light impersonation over there.
Yes.
This finale, what did you all think of this?
I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of the ending of, instead of, like I say, I always called, and you could ask Linda this, I always called the Soprano ending. Where it cuts to black, you don't know what happens. Just like in The Sopranos, when Tony Soprano, for those that may be a little too young to know what I'm talking about, he sits down and see the doorway, and then those two guys walk in, and then it just cuts. We don't know what happened to him. I would have liked to have, but we didn't know if we were getting a season 2 or not. So, I would have liked to have seen, would Daniel and Black be able to take on the other 4 members of the Voltron Force, or would they have been able to take him down? I would have, because there was that power struggle there, especially between Daniel and Lance, like there was with Keith and Lance.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen a little bit more elaboration as to what happened there at the end.
Okay, I think I could put a little bit of a scene together. He starts fighting with the other lions, and Lance, of course, is like, "Hey, what's going on here?" And they all start trying to get him out of the lion somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually they do, and they find out about a Hegarium infection because they start like at the beginning they have to like physically hold him down because
Mm-hmm.
he's out of control, and then they start doing some testing on him and stuff like that, and they find the Hegarium infection, and then that's where it comes into the book.
Mm-hmm.
As for the episode itself, I loved it. As not in great anticipation of the second season, I thought it was a wonderful cliffhanger. I
Yes.
really loved the action. I loved that Daniel had to face his inner demons at least until the last scene when he kind of let them, unleash. But I loved it as a cliffhanger to a next season. It is still frustrating to me that we didn't get a resolution to the story, but taken on its own as an ending. I think it still works as an ending. It's a cliffhanger that it is unresolved, but I think the episode is so action packed and fun and pulls out all the stops that it still works really well for me.
I was actually kind of surprised that he so easily gave up the key,
So am I.
you know, considering what was going on inside him. I kind of thought it would have been harder to get the key from
I honestly think that should have been a fight.
him.
And being the writer that I am, I may write that scene.
It's been a while since you've written anything, hasn't it?
It's been a minute. I lost my voice for a while, but she's coming back. So I may write that struggle.
I think the action that they had, during the course of this, I think they could have done a little bit more at the beginning to show the struggles that Earth was having against Mayhawks. In my mind, Earth was giving up too easy. There wasn't enough showing fighting against Mayhawks from Earth.
Then again, it's it's Voltron Force, not the Galaxy Alliance show.
Right.
So
Yeah. I would have just liked to have seen Earth put up a little bit of a fight.
Yeah.
yeah,
But then, we got to move the show along.
right.
I
And
mean,
it's not like Third Dimension where Zarkon is undermining everything behind the scenes.
yeah,
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry,
this
we
is
don't talk
also
about Third Dimension, do we?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
sure we do. Um, but at the halfway point of the season, when Sky Marshal Wade took over the Earth and had taken over Voltron temporarily, I mean, Earth. I mean, as far as we know, there was really no resistance from Earth, and they were on Earth walking around. Nobody was putting up a fight there. So this is more of the same. I'm not saying it's justified for that reason, but we have an established pattern of Earth just kind of twiddling its thumbs as it gets attacked.
Hmm. Yeah. So with the whole thing with Mayhawks, though, the whole thing where he was sort of in control for most of the episode, and then towards the end he lost it. I think the whole thing that turned it around was the Castle of Lions as a spaceship. It obviously looked like we were at a moment where Black Lion was going to get destroyed, and just the Castle of Lions spaceship saved it.
Mhm.
So I think that was the turning point there.
Agreed. Plus Keith coming in with the experience.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
So I think it goes to show that if you are bringing in three young cadets to take over for 3 of 5, this is another thing I didn't understand. Why were there only 3? Why was it 3? Was it just because they had these special talents, and they couldn't find another 2 people that had special talents? Because at some point along the way, you saw Lance and Hunk and everybody saying, "All right, who's next? Who's going to
Uh-huh.
get who's going to get replaced?" It's not like they had a discussion about it ahead of time.
Right.
Yeah, I would have thought that they would have.
I mean, these guys aren't getting any younger.
I would have thought that they would have had the discussion. Well, Laura's definitely getting replaced, so she can go back to being running Aris.
Right. She was never
Right.
meant to be permanent anyway.
Right. So that was her sort of purpose, and that's what they knew sort of, but they really didn't know who else was getting replaced.
And what's the rush, for crying out loud?
Right.
In the narrative. I mean, I realize that they did it at an accelerated pace to up the stakes for Daniel, to make him more desperate and do whatever he needed to do to keep up with his fellow cadet friends. But if you think about it from first of all, none of the Voltron Force pilots is old. They've been doing it for a while, but there's no indication that any of them is long in the tooth. And so you have three cadets. Does that mean they all have to go bang, 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 and become new pilots untested, and you just keep replacing them, just for reasons? It doesn't make sense realistically. But I think in the terms of this being a Daniel focused season with him, it's an ensemble show, but the show very much covers an arc for Daniel in particular.
Mhm.
I think it was done primarily to make him more and more desperate.
Yeah, and we always knew that his goal was to become the Black Lion pilot.
Right.
Mhm.
He didn't want red. He didn't want yellow. He definitely wanted black. But when you think about it, with the experience that the leader of the Voltron Force has to have in order to make that a team, it just seems like Keith should have held on longer,
Mhm.
and maybe Daniel was another pilot, rather than. I
Mhm.
mean, from the whole Speed Force thing, it seemed like he was built for red,
You
Yeah.
would think.
you know?
And I don't think he would have taken any other lion
No.
if Keith had not given up black. He would not have taken any other lion.
Mhm.
He had his sights on black, his heart on black.
His
It was
ego
black
on
all the
black.
way around. Yep.
So that's just my whole thing about there's three cadets and there's five pilots.
Right.
It's like, all right, it's the hot dogs and the buns thing again. The hot
Hmm.
dog package doesn't have
Yep.
the same amount as the
No.
buns package.
Mm-mm.
Why?
I have a theory as to why they only replaced three.
Okay.
Continuity. I mean, and this made more sense in my head 5 seconds ago. Instead of replacing the entire force and having five inexperienced pilots there, leave two to help mentor and guide the new pilots. Now,
Hmm.
why that is Lance and Hunk, I have no idea. But that's
Yeah.
my thought. In my world, if I were to have three step down and two stay as mentors, it would be Keith and Lance because Keith is the commander.
Hmm.
And I don't know if this is canon, I don't care. I would argue that Lance is his second in command. And they would be the logical ones to stay and to guide the new pilots.
Yeah.
But what do I know?
Yeah. The second in command is always like the right hand, right?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Yeah. So that's just a symbolic thing. It makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
If they had five cadets and five pilots, the number of characters is already pretty high.
This
I
is
often
true.
felt like they had to kind of have an A plot, B plot sort of structure to a lot
Mhm.
of the episodes where you have the pilots doing one thing, the cadets doing another thing, and that was kind of challenging to do. I would have to think episode after episode. If you had five in each group, that would have been quite something. I mean, even the vehicle Voltron characters from the original series, you only focused on a very small number of them. So
True.
even though there was a group of 15, at most, maybe five in a given episode had much to do. They kept that enormous number manageable doing that. In this one, where it's a kind of an ensemble show, if you had any more characters than eight was already kind of pushing it. I just don't see how that would have worked out with 10 leads or 10 heroes.
Hmm. Right. All right. Can we talk about the book?
Let's
Yes, we
do
could
it.
talk about the book.
So, for those of you who read the book, what did you think of what would have been the second season?
I liked where it was going. Just looking at it now, revisiting it, we got the answers from, what Daniel and his thing, but can we talk about Zombie Lotor? And then,
Okay.
but it's always the cat. Cat's always involved.
Yeah.
Kovacs. Oh, right, Kovacs. Did I say that right?
Kova.
Kova. I don't know where I got Kovacs from, but just that damn cat's always involved. Yeah,
So what's a quick synopsis? There are going to be a lot of people who have no clue what the epilogue even
yeah.
covers. I mean,
Basic.
in a nutshell, what's going on?
So you have the epilogue, which shows the roe beast, the tentacle roe beast of
Mm.
basically they're on Earth, and then it goes showing Lotor looks like he's landing back on Dune, and I'm not sure who wrote this, Mark, but it was really good, and it just says, I have been watching, I have seen the rise of kings and the death of empires. I have seen the whole living planet go cold. And in the ruins, I've planted a seed. For all these many years, I have watched it grow, nurtured as if it were my own flesh until it bore a succulent fruit. Then I watched as that fruit was plucked by the wrong hands, its milk wasted again and again by fuel. Fools are allowed with this who allowed that cantankerous robot to evolve, rediscover its own secrets, regain some of its former glory, and now that heap of hardware is controlled by children. They mock us, but not for long. Now that wretched Galaxy Alliance is broken and the Serpent Mayhax has met his demise, and it's time to rebuild, to resurrect an empire, to promise a harvesting new crop. I have been watching, I have been waiting for this moment. Now, who's saying that?
That's
That's what always got me. Was that Lotor
Nope,
or was it the cat? I always
nope.
thought it was the cat because the cat's always been there. Or is it Hagar?
That's it.
it's Hagar.
Yep.
Basically, it just shows Lotor rising from the dead again, getting into one of the coffins of the that the Robies get in, and he's shot off. And then it basically just picks back up into where you have Keith, you have not Lotor, sorry, Lance, back in the Castle of Lions, and they're like, why has Lotor's body never been recovered? And Pidge is asking, and then I'm just reading this real quick because it's been a long time since I've looked at this. And they're pouring over the footage trying to figure out, where the body has gone. Keith is, keep looking. Um, and then Queen Allura comes walking in with Karan. And Laramine is there, Hunk is there, everybody's there. Queen Allura asks, has anybody checked in on Daniel? And then you see Daniel in the med bay, and he's hooked up to all these monitors and everything, and there's just something in his head going, Daniel, your friends have forsaken you. They are scared of you, of your power. Look how
Mm.
they flaunt that with which you desire. And then you can see the lions are flying off again. So once again, he wants to be with Black, but
Yeah.
but Black's not there. And then Daniel escapes out of the med bays, and just Karan and Pidge and Allura in the control room, and Karan telling Allura, I shall take my leave, my majesty, regarding Daniel, seems to have a calming effect on his body. Um, and then you have Allura talking to Keith about how, just how he's impressive as always, and then the infamous kiss
Yeah.
that I think every K&A shipper had been waiting the last 40 whatever years for.
Right.
That's canon.
Right.
Um,
It actually happened in this comic.
mhm.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Well, with response to what was happening to Daniel,
Hmm.
it was through the Hegarium that she was able to have any influence on him.
Yeah.
It was almost a lot like, how the Emperor Palpatine worked Anakin to become Darth Vader. And a lot of the times he was doing it in his thoughts, in his dreams, all that kind of stuff to try to sway him away from the Jedi.
Yeah.
And so I think the same thing was happening with Daniel and Hagar.
Yeah. And then, after the big kiss, you just basically just it's broken up with, Karan notices Daniel's missing, and then they go running off, and Vince sees the same message, saying he hasn't moved a muscle in a month, and he's almost at his dorm. And then Vince gets into the dorm, and then there's Kova again,
Mhm.
and he attacks Vince, and
Vince loses an
Pidge,
eye.
yep, he loses an eye, and then you got Hunk, Pidge, and Lance in Red's Bay. Power goes out, doors start shutting. Keith and Alora are trying to get to him. Lasers are going off. Daniel's then in the defenses and trying to get him to lower the defenses. He ends up shooting just looking back and shooting a beam at Laramina, who's trying to stop him. And then it just shows, all the robeasts that are just landing everywhere. And then you just see the Hagarium just pouring out of Daniel,
Mhm.
and it's Hagar.
Yeah, it's like out of a horror film.
It
Yeah,
is.
It's pretty gruesome looking.
yeah.
Yeah. And it just goes on to show where, Vince loses an eye and he has a cybernetic eye put in. And then it just cuts to, they're in Voltron trying to take down all these robots, all these robeasts. And next thing you know, Keith is leaving, to go find goes into a ship for a mobile base operations, leaving Allura behind on Aris, and trying to find Daniel because he's run off. And it's almost like a Star Wars, Luke and Darth Vader kind of thing, where they show the one little snippet here where it's Daniel standing next to Lotor with
Hmm.
Hagar,
Hmm.
very Lord Palpatine-ish, Kylo Ren kind of feel to it.
Right,
And he's all of a sudden become one with the dark side.
right. Exactly.
And and then it would just kind of gives a snippet of what Vince is saying about um how he's not giving up on
On Daniel.
Daniel.
Right. He
So
senses there is still some good in him.
yeah, so very very Star Wars kind of ending there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Voltron Force basically, Allura stays back to rebuild Eris because it gets pretty smashed up by all the row beasts, and the rest of the Voltron Force seemingly leaves in a new ship that we hadn't seen in the first season because Voltron doesn't have enough power to fight this new threat. So they're looking for the mysterious fifth planet, which I think they called
Voltronics.
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 That's it with an X. Yeah,
Yeah.
looking for something to increase Voltron's power.
Right.
And Vince, when you finally see him in the present day of the story, has a cybernetic replacement eye,
Hmm.
and you see a scar around his eye where the cat had attacked him. So it's pretty gruesome and dark, a major change in tone. It's
Yeah.
kind of consistent with the very first of the Voltron Force Viz Media comics, where they had this
Hmm.
common dreamscape where all this horrific stuff was going on. The tone of this is really very similar to that and very
it,
dissimilar from the TV show.
it's actually bloody in the drawing, and you don't see a lot of that in Voltron Force, where there was the blood or anything like that. And that's the
Well,
only time I think I've ever seen that.
the comic didn't have to be TVY7.
No, it didn't. It didn't, but just for the effect is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the epilogue from that book?
I thought it pulled everything together pretty good. But once again, and how you're talking about the fifth planet and everything, were they planning on tying Vince to that planet? Because that was always one of my things was, we kind of really never understood Vince where he got his powers from,
Yeah.
and how it kind of tied in with Voltron and the changing and just that whole mysticism about it. And his and the telepathy with Daniel. Vince wasn't infected with the Hagarium, so how is he to have telepathy with Daniel and nobody else? So
Right.
I liked where that was going, and I would have liked to have seen that fifth planet show up, but I really like the way um the epilogue tied in, and you know, but just that little bit I read of that one page of what Hagar was saying, just I don't know, it just kind of stuck a chord with me. Just it just I don't know why, but it just struck a chord that just kind of I just liked the path that this was going if this had led into a second season.
It would have certainly been a totally different type of
Mm-hmm.
show, wouldn't it have been?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I don't know if it would have been for young kids.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
No.
It feels like a radical shift in tone. I would be I if this were the plan for season two, I can't imagine that it would have been shown in as
More Adult Swim, not Nickelodeon.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I can imagine them having to go on some quest, and the stakes are higher. But the way that they show it in this comic seems very much written for readers of this book who would be looking back on Voltron at 30 and an adult crowd, aging up the Voltron Force to make it seem like, oh yeah, totally adult, grown up, oriented. We love it. But I don't. It doesn't. I am not a fan of it because of the tonal shift and because it's just a vignette. It's not really a story. It's just sort of setting the chess pieces for a story, for a different kind of story that again we'll never see. And it's I find it kind of frustrating on that level more than anything. Although the darker tone is kind of neat, I guess. I don't know. It doesn't feel like a genuine follow-on to season one to me, but to each their own.
Yeah. I don't think if there's a Voltron that there's ever really a long time where we have any kind of peace. There's always conflict. There's always something going on that we have to defend.
Yeah,
And it's just always going to be that way with Voltron.
Mhm.
yeah. Peace is no fun, right? I mean, look
Yeah.
what happened to Legendary Defender. They had peace, and the Lions got bored and left.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. They just ran off.
Like, you guys are boring. Now we're gone.
I want to bring this to a close, but I want to see if you guys have any final thoughts before we go.
Just
Do any
excited, just anticipating what the Amazon movie is going to be. And I know that's probably a subject for an entirely different
Yeah,
episode, but
it is. It is. Well, what are your thoughts?
it could be either be very, very good or there's going to be people that don't like it regardless of how it comes out. I'm sitting back here waiting and seeing. I don't know enough to make a judgment, but I'm excited for it.
I'm excited too. We've been waiting for this a long time.
For
Oh
real.
God, have we ever? I'm excited. I'm hesitant
Mhm.
just from what we've been told at Volcon. Um, but I'm excited because we've been waiting a long time. We've been waiting 40 years for this. But
Yes.
I just and I have trust in Bob. I have trust in their visions because they have not done us wrong in the past. But I just hope the route that they're going stays true to the vision of Voltron and brings something that everybody can enjoy it, whether it be young kids, older older viewers like us.
Mhm.
But I'm hesitant. I'm not gonna lie because don't forget where they came from,
Mhm.
wanting to go, but we don't know if they're going a whole new route. I think Bob said they were trying to, but just remember where it came from.
Mhm.
We shall see.
Yes.
Yep.
But I hope for the best intentions, and like I said, I have trust in them, and just
Even
based on I just remember conversations at the brewery in New York during New York Comic Con.
Uh-huh.
And it it was, just those conversations. I think they're gonna do right by everybody. And I think lessons from the past have been learned. So I'm trying to keep the faith. So
Yeah,
but I'm sure it'll go well.
I really hope it's something that appeals to people of all ages. So we'll see.
All
All
right.
right. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Linda. Thank you,
You're
Tara.
welcome. Always a
Very
pleasure.
welcome. Yes.
Yep. Thank you much.
And we'll see you all next time on
Let's Voltron.